everyone, and welcome to the process of making the Myotragus for NeddytheNoodle in ARK Survival Evolved. For those who don't know, NeddytheNoodle is another YouTuber who makes these absolutely amazing lore videos surrounding ARK Survival Evolved. I would highly recommend checking out his content. And he approached myself and Somi to try and create his concept of a new ARK dino for the latest Fjorda community voted creation contest. And there's no guarantee that this creature will actually make it into the game, but that is our hope, and like I mentioned, he asked us to help realise his design. And it was a really awesome just process in general. It was really great working with him. If you want to know more about the actual creature for ARK Survival Evolved, I'd again recommend checking out his video. You can see it links down below. But for this video, for mine, I'm going to be going over the process, since it's one of my few times I've dabbled in actual creature design in terms of making a concept as opposed to just like drawing like something that already exists. This one's more about developing and evolving something to fit into the game, and is also based on the Myotragus, which is was an existing prehistoric goat. And the main thing that was really interesting about this, from a creature design perspective, is that if you look up the Myotragus, it has a very bizarre anatomy, or at least in the fossils and statues, the fossils and depictions that I could find. It's got a very hunched over back, it's very squat looking, very round, and thinking about a ARK Survival Evolved creature, it reminded me a bit too much of existing creatures like the Megaloceros, like the Ovis, and I especially didn't want to just have a big bulbously round creature, but to start off the concept and just to get our feet off the ground and begin the creature, I did make it quite literally like what I could see on Google. And the result was, like I mentioned, a very squat looking, kind of funny looking thing. It was a nice start, but the way he described his vision for the creature would have been something that was a bit larger and a bit more battle appropriate, something more like a ram, or one of the goats that you'd see from the Lord of the Rings that the dwarves ride. I think it's a goat or a ram, either way, just something much bigger and burlier looking. And after a bit of back and forth discussion between Neddy, myself and Somi, we came to the conclusion to have something that's a little bit, something that was quite bulky, and it did still have a bit of a upper ridge to its spine, so it still looked quite curvy, such as the original concept, but still something that looked kind of large, kind of proud, a lot more like a moose. Since, once again, like with ARK Survival Evolved creatures, they tend to be very stylized, and we wanted to try and adapt the style into the creature. We wanted the creature to look like it fits in the game and therefore have our highest chance of winning, hopefully, fingers crossed. It needed to be tall, it needed to be confident looking. We wanted this to look like a creature that would be worth taming, or at least something that might be adventurous, exciting, or even a little bit intimidating to find out in the wild. So, as mentioned, throughout the concept, we did play quite a bit around with the general anatomy and physique of the creature. What was originally very stumpy, very kind of timid looking, wanted like a very small and meek herbivore, we transitioned to something larger, taller, the legs were straighter, the body was a bit more compact, but also just a bit more muscular. Added a lot of definition to the neck to make it just look, again, much larger. As a common trait in larger herbivores, again referring more to larger goats and moose, is that they have a sturdy small head, they've got a very large powerful neck, they have big haunches or shoulder blades. You can just really see the strength of the creature, and in particular for the Myotragus, as it does have small little goat horns, we wanted to give it the ability to headbutt, or at least have the option to, or maybe not headbutt, but just some sort of attack or defense with its horns, and that again would require a much stronger neck, which was something that this model was initially lacking towards the beginning. While I did put a lot of emphasis onto shaping up the body, I still wanted to take some time just to define the anatomy a little bit more. In regards to the overall creature anatomy, design, the skin textures, things like the hooves as well, I referred a lot to other various mammals within the game, especially ones like the Chalicotherium, like the Paraceratherium. Funnily enough, some of the more lower poly models, but still do a rather eloquent job of just comparing styles and comparing techniques. My initial goal for the creature, so we always planned for the creature to be fluffy because, well, first of all, ARK can support it, and I think a goat should be fluffy. But I did a lot of comparisons to the Chalicotherium and the Paraceratherium because they have just this kind of very gross looking low-res skin textures on the models, and it just would have been a very useful thing to kind of refer to so that I could try and define the muscle definition, the ribs, the bones, any joints, and still try and make it look familiar to the game. I still wanted to look a bit more, like a little bit more high resolution, a bit more artistic, but not too foreign either. I really wanted to look like it could be an ARK creature, and that includes flaws and all. We also wanted there to be a bit of extra definition to the hooves as well, since this again is a goat. We want the goat to be able to traverse vertical terrain, very similar to the tech boots, or the sprint during tech boots. And for that, Neddy did want the hooves to be a bit more elongated, just a little bit more pronounced, a little bit more visible. Once that part was complete, and there was also some very nice hoof practice for myself, because I very rarely draw herbivores, and this entire project was a really great opportunity to learn some new techniques and styles. And again, hoof studies. Once all that was complete, we took a step back, we had another look at the silhouette of the model so far, and concluded that while we are liking this burly looking creature, it's still straying just a little bit too far away from the Myotragus. So we did try experimenting with the spine again. We tried giving it a big curved spine, and it did make it look a lot more like a pack animal, or a beast of burden, something like a donkey. But then we did ultimately, once again, kind of go a bit back and forth with it. And instead of making the spine curved outwards like a hump, or like a hump of a camel, as it did look at one point, we then tried pinning the neck higher up once again. We tried making the spine to look a little bit more squared. Not quite fully squared, but again, just adding like a lot of definition to the hips, the shoulder blades. Really wants a big chunky neck, had to make the head a little bit smaller to compensate. Like I mentioned earlier, really kind of honing in a bit more of a moose-like anatomy. So these kind of changes and proportions do just kind of help drive home that this is a larger creature. We want this to be quite large, quite stocky. I'd say probably about the size of a cow, perhaps even larger. And therefore just having this much burlier body proportions was very, very important. And the original Myotragus design that you see in the fossils and on Google Images, it just looked a bit too small for this. It looked too small and, as I mentioned earlier, too timid. Then after a while, I started to focus more on the face of the Myotragus. One thing that was really convenient is that the Myotragus is not the only goat or goat-like creature in-game. We also have the Ovis, a sheep, and the Shinehorn, which is a very tiny little baby goat. And what's really handy about these is that both of those creatures have very characteristic faces. They got bright blue eyes, they've got big black markings around their eyes. They look really cute, and it was just a perfect reference. Now, while the Myotragus isn't meant to be, you know, a small cute creature like the Ovis and Shinehorn, it's still another herbivore that I was able to really take a lot of inspiration from, and cross-compare it to other creatures like the Chalicotherium to try and give it like a bit more of like a larger facial structure. But otherwise, I made the eyes exactly the same as the Ovis and Shinehorn, especially the black markings as well. I tried to make the face very similar. I didn't want it to look too happy like the other two did. I still wanted this creature to look quite serious. So I ditched the smile and I made its lips or jowls just kind of dragging just a little bit, again trying to get like a sense of gravity going on. But for the most part, I personally feel like I nailed the style quite nicely towards the end, especially when everything's textured and coloured. I think it resembles current in-game animals quite nicely and therefore fits the bill, looks very familiar. And then once I was happy with the overall face, the ears, the eyes, the horns, and of course the rest of the body, we started moving on to the mane and fur, as the mane and fur is going to do a very important job of highlighting the overall silhouette of the creature, the overall mass, where it's poofy in some places, and can also just do a lot for shape language in regards to areas like the mane, as it can make the creature look wild or calm or what have you. Now, I will admit that in terms of ZBrush and in terms of the way I've done the mane, it was quite a bit lazy. The reason being is that it was always the goal that my model here, I'm just kind of shooting at the concept. I am essentially doing what a concept artist would do, and that's to doodle various sketches, but for whatever reason, I'm just a lot better at doing this in 3D than I am in 2D. So what you're seeing here is literally me concept drafting, and Somi will be the one that will take my final renders and actually make it look like a legitimate traditional drawing. She's the one that's going to stylize it into the dossier appearance. So, in other words, I was able to be quite lazy with the mane. I didn't have to worry about, you know, the individual strands of hair looking all nice and clean and perfect. Some of it was a little bit jagged, the polygons were definitely a bit messy, but once again, it was more about the silhouette, it's more about the shape. And in my opinion, I feel like that between the two of us, we got to quite a nice, efficiently fast, and definitely a very satisfying finish. One suggestion that Somi had that we both really liked was to really make this goat a goat, was to give it a bit of a goatee. We absolutely had to, and honestly I think it really gave the creature a lot of personality. again, like a very important thing that I mentioned earlier was we did not want it to be too close to any existing creature. And the general anatomy of the Myotragus means it's very susceptible to being too similar to the Megaloceros, and we did not want that because, you know, why would you just want another of the same creature? We want it to be unique, its own independent concept. And that's actually a thing that I myself have noticed a lot when I'm playing ARK, because I'll often see a female Megaloceros and mistake it for a Novus. Again, that's just really not ideal, we don't really want that. So adding a lot of the fur, the big crazy mane, not quite like the Equus, more of its own thing, but still a bit of a big mane. A bit of a chest hair as well, and especially the goatee. It's just going to help make it stand out, it's going to help make it look different from the Equus and the Megaloceros. We also gave it some very bushy ankles and wrists. Again, tried to make the creature look just big and wild, and once again suiting the Fjorda environment, which is going to be a very cold Arctic place. So we wanted it to be quite woolly and poofy. And then ultimately the final step was the coloration. Now for the colours, I would admit that I got a bit ahead of myself with this one. Now thankfully it all panned out well in the end, but you see. Somi did a quick little draft of a colour palette. She made it quite a bit stripy, I think inspired by Okapi colour schemes and patterns. And I just really liked it. I am very quick when it comes to texturing. It's my favourite part of making any model. So I kind of just jumped in, did all the colours, did all the patterns, and then realised, oh wait, Neddy never approved. Turns out he did like it in the end, but that was definitely a little bit, me being a bit quick there. However, for the coloration, so I did mention to Somi that a really nice thing of some of the more recent creature additions to ARK Survival Evolved is that they've been experimenting a lot more with colorations, with patterns, with especially colour IDs, since mutation breeding is such a big thing, and it's just really cool to see like these big, colourful, you know, very aesthetically pleasing looking designs. And it was really cool to see Somi try and apply that to the Myotragus here, since it could have been just very bland looking. It could have just looked like a Megaloceros, and it could have just looked like an Equus. And I mean, the Equus can be very nice, but again, we don't want just another zebra-like creature. So she went and did like a bit of a mixture where it had a bit of a piebald patterning. Oh, is it really piebald? I'm not quite sure, but a bit of patterning nonetheless, and just a little bit of stripes in very specific areas, and a little bit of facial markings as well. And in the end, I just felt like it came out looking really nice. The tonal colours as well, where it's a bit of a black and white, a bit of a beige, brown, grey, really suits the whole winter Arctic vibe. Where it's not too Arctic, not too camouflagey, but again just looks nice and independent. And it was especially really nice to see the markings differ on the mane, as well as, like I mentioned, the stripes, the feet being on the lighter side, the hooves can have their own colour region as well. I just really like how it came out at the end, and the markings on the face and beard. And ultimately, once my part of the concept was done, I gave a bit of a posing and shipped it straight off to Somi, and she worked her magic on it to try and convert my renders into the illustrations that you see in the dossier, so that it really looks like the official wildcard ones. And in the end, like I mentioned, this entire project was just really fun to work with. Neddy was absolutely fantastic, very informative, very enthusiastic, very polite, and it was just really cool and really fun to do this. It was cool to be a part of it, it was cool to do the drawing, to hash the ideas around, give and receive feedback, experiment, play with the idea, and again, just being a part of it. Like I said, it was really cool, and I'm really happy I got the opportunity to do this. Now, like I mentioned, this is all for a creature contest, and if you would like to see this, or perhaps any other creature, not necessarily just our own, but any submissions that you like, to vote for the submissions, you just hit the upvote arrow on the top left of any thread submission that you like. Gotta have an account to the website, of course. And like I said, it'd be really cool to see the Myotragus in the game. It'd be really sweet. I really love the actual thematic idea of the creature. I think it's really fitting, and I think it would be just a really good addition to the game in terms of gameplay mechanics, as well as a cool looking herbivore. And yeah, I'll say it again, if you would like to know more about the creature concept itself and how it would actually play in game, I will link Neddy's video down below in the video description. I would really highly recommend watching it. And otherwise, I hope you've enjoyed the more artsy portion of this entire production. Thank you all very much for watching. Thank you, NeddytheNoodle, for the opportunity, and Somi for taking part. And yep, I'll see you all next time. Have a wonderful day and take care. Cheers.